Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're stepping into the polished world of the Edwardian age, a time of gaslight and quiet authority, where heavy doors close softly, clocks tick with discipline, and manners shape every breath. You're not a lord or a statesman, just an ordinary Edwardian gentleman, moving carefully through a day built on restraint, tradition, and appearances. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before you intend to, not to an alarm, but to the soft pressure of habit itself. The room is quiet in a way that feels intentional, as if silence has been arranged during the night and left carefully in place for you to discover. Pale light presses through the curtains, filtered by heavy fabric, chosen long ago for its seriousness. Nothing in the room is casual, even the air seems trained to behave. You lie still for a moment, aware of the ceiling above you, high and faintly shadowed, with its modest moulding that speaks of taste rather than extravagance. The bed beneath you is firm, correct, and unyielding in the way that is meant to build character. Sheets are smooth and tucked with precision, corners sharp enough to suggest that comfort is something to be controlled rather than enjoyed. You do not stretch freely, that would feel excessive. Instead, you move carefully, as if the morning itself is watching. As you sit up, the floor offers a brief chill through your slippers, reminding you that warmth must be earned, not expected. The room smells faintly of soap, polished wood, and a trace of coal smoke drifting in from somewhere beyond the walls. These are a respectable scents, familiar and reassuring, though none of them belong entirely to you. They are inherited, much like the room, much like the life waiting just outside the bedroom door. Everything around you has a place, and more importantly, everything knows that place. The wardrobe stands closed, its dark wood gleaming softly, containing garments that already understand how the day will proceed. A chair holds yesterday's clothing, brushed and folded, resting patiently until it is time to disappear again. On the bedside table, a watch lies face up, precise and dependable, quietly measuring a world that values punctuality over impulse. You breathe slowly because breathing too deeply would feel improper, indulgent. Even alone, you remain aware of posture, of composure, of the invisible audience that has shaped you since childhood. Shoulders back, chin level. These instructions have been repeated so often that they no longer feel like instructions at all. They feel like gravity. When you rise, you do so deliberately. The simple act of standing carries meaning. An Edwardian gentleman does not leap from bed or linger excessively. He rises because rising is expected, and because remaining still for too long invites thoughts that have no proper outlet. You smooth the front of your nightshirt, even though no one is there to see it. Appearances, after all, are not for others alone. They are a discipline practiced in private. The washstand waits nearby, porcelain basin already filled by unseen hands earlier in the morning. The water is cool, brisk enough to clear away any softness that sleep might have left behind. You wash your face carefully, methodically, splashing without enthusiasm. There is no pleasure in this, but there is reassurance. Cleanliness is proof that order still exists. As water runs over your skin, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. The reflection looks back with a polite familiarity, composed and faintly distant. Your expression settles naturally into something neutral, something that reveals nothing and offends no one. Even your own face has learned restraint. You dry yourself with a towel, folded just so, careful not to disturb the symmetry of the stand. Shaving follows, another quiet ritual. The razor glides slowly, attentively. There is time for this, because time itself has been organized around men like you. Each stroke removes not only stubble, but any trace of disorder that might suggest carelessness. The faint scrape of metal against skin is steady and calming, a sound that belongs to mornings like this one, mornings that repeat with comforting regularity. Once finished, you inspect your work without pride. Pride would be noticeable. Instead, you settle for approval, the quiet satisfaction of having met expectations that were never fully explained but always firmly enforced. You rinse the blade, wipe the sink, and leave everything exactly as it was meant to be left. Dressing is not a choice so much as a sequence. Undergarments first, practical and unseen, followed by layers that grow increasingly public. Each item carries weight, both literal and symbolic. The fabric is well made, tailored to fit a body trained not to slouch or relax too completely. Buttons fasten with soft clicks, small confirmations that things are proceeding correctly. As you pull on your trousers, you feel the gentle resistance of wool, the structure guiding your movements. A shirt follows, crisp and starched, collar stiff enough to remind you of its presence throughout the day. When you fasten it, the fabric presses lightly against your throat, a constant courteous restraint. It does not choke, it merely reminds. The waistcoat adds another layer of respectability, pockets designed for objects that signal purpose. A watch chain rests across your chest, decorative yet functional, a symbol of measured time and measured behaviour. When the jacket comes on, the transformation feels complete. The mirror reflects someone ready to be seen, someone who belongs exactly where he stands. Shoes are polished to a dull shine, laces tied neatly without haste. You straighten them even after they are already straight. Small corrections are a habit, a way of keeping the world from drifting too far off course. As you stand fully dressed, the room seems to recognize you again, as if the costume confirms your right to occupy the space. Before leaving, you glance once more around the bedroom. The bed is already made, smoothed by practiced hands. Any evidence of sleep has been erased. The night is gone, and with it any freedom it might have offered. Daylight requires clarity, control, and composure. You open the door and step into the hallway, where the house hums quietly with restrained activity. Footsteps are soft, doors open and close without sound. Somewhere below, breakfast waits, arranged and timed, ready to be consumed politely. The day stretches ahead, orderly and predictable, filled with conversations that will say very little and actions that will mean a great deal. As you begin to descend the stairs, hand resting lightly on the banister, you feel the familiar settling of the roll around you. The gentleman is awake now, fully assembled, moving forward with calm certainty. There is comfort in this, undeniable and warm like a well-worn path. Yet beneath it all, barely acknowledged, is the sense that this careful beginning is not freedom, but maintenance. Still, you move on, composed and proper, carrying the quiet weight of respectability into the rest of the day. The house remains hushed as you linger near the wardrobe, the soft echo of your own movements absorbed by thick carpets and high ceilings. Light has strengthened slightly now, filtering in with a pale determination that reveals textures you already know by heart. The wood grain of the wardrobe door catches the glow, polished to a restrained sheen, neither dull nor showy. It stands before you like a quiet authority, holding not choices but obligations. When you open it, the scent of wool, starch, and faintly perfumed soap drifts outward. The garments inside hang with disciplined spacing, each item aligned as if aware of its rank. Nothing here exists for comfort alone. These clothes were designed to communicate, to instruct the body on how to behave once enclosed within them. You reach for the shirt, crisp and cool against your fingers. The fabric offers little softness, its stiffness deliberate, purposeful. As you slip your arms through the sleeves, the material resists, just enough to remind you that ease is not its function. The collar, once fastened, rests firmly against your neck. It does not hurt, but it does not let you forget it is there. Throughout the day, it will guide your posture, encourage your chin upward, discourage relaxation. Buttons close with a small repetitive sound, a rhythm that feels oddly ceremonial. Each fastening draws the fabric closer to your body, defining its outline, narrowing the space where unregulated movement might occur. By the time the last button is secured, your breathing has subtly adjusted, shallower now, more controlled, as if your lungs themselves understand propriety. The waistcoat follows, its lining smooth, its exterior finely woven. You slide it on and feel how it pulls you inward, compressing the torso just slightly. It shapes your stance, guiding your shoulders back and your chest forward, presenting a silhouette that speaks of confidence without invitation. You fasten it slowly, watching your reflection as the image grows more complete, more convincing. In the mirror, you see someone you recognize, though not intimately. The man staring back appears assembled, reliable, entirely appropriate. His clothes do not reveal him. They obscure him politely. Whatever thoughts or uncertainties may linger inside him remain hidden beneath layers of tradition and expectation. Trousers come next. They're cut precise, tailored to move in particular ways and not others. The waistband sits high, encouraging a straight spine and measured steps. Once fastened, they claim your hips and legs, dictating stride and pace. Walking will be deliberate today, even if no one is watching. Socks are pulled up carefully, shoes slid on and laced tight. Leather creases slightly as you move, already conforming to the shape of your feet, yet never yielding entirely. They are made to last, these shoes, much like the role they support. Polished surfaces reflect just enough light to signal care, but not vanity. The jacket waits patiently, draped over the chair. When you lift it, you feel its weight immediately, heavier than it appears, structured and purposeful. Sliding your arms into the sleeves is like stepping into a familiar confinement. The shoulders sit firmly, shaping your upper body into a posture that conveys calm authority. The fabric settles around you, sealing the transformation. As the jacket closes, the sensation is unmistakable. You are held together now, physically and socially. The garments do not merely cover you, they contain you. Within them, your movements are guided, your gestures moderated, your impulses softened into acceptable forms. The clothes teach as much as they adorn. You adjust the cuffs, straighten the lapels, smooth invisible wrinkles that may not even exist. These small acts are instinctive, a language learned long ago. Perfection is not required, but effort must always be visible. Carelessness would suggest disrespect, not just for others, but for the entire structure that has placed you here. The watch chain is clipped into place, its gentle curve across your waistcoat both ornamental and symbolic. Time is close to your body, where it belongs. You check the watch briefly, not because you're late, but because checking itself feels necessary. Punctuality is reassurance. It tells you that the world is still operating as it should. A tie or cravat completes the ensemble, knotted with practiced ease. Your fingers know the movements without conscious thought, looping and tightening until the knot sits just right. Too loose would appear careless. Too tight would suggest tension. The balance must always be maintained. When you step back from the mirror, fully dressed, the room seems to respond. The man reflected there fits seamlessly into the setting, as though he has emerged from it rather than dressed within it. The clothes anchor you to the house, to the city, to the expectations waiting beyond the door. You feel taller now, not because your body has changed, but because your posture has been instructed to rise. Your thoughts, too, feel narrower, more focused. There is less room for wandering ideas, less space for private uncertainty. The armour of fabric has done its work quietly and efficiently. Yet within this composure, there is a faint awareness of pressure. The garments hold you together so well that removing them would feel like unraveling. They shape not just how you appear, but how you think, how you move, how you respond to the world. Without them, you might feel unfinished, undefined. You take a few steps, testing the fit, listening to the soft sounds of fabric moving against itself. The clothes move with you, but only just. They permit motion without encouraging it. Even alone, your gestures are contained, your pace measured. As you turn toward the door, you catch one last glimpse of yourself. The gentleman is fully formed now, every detail aligned with expectation. The role fits so closely that it is difficult to tell where it ends and you begin. Perhaps it has been like this for some time. You reach for your hat resting nearby, its brim firm and unbending. When you place it on your head, the effect is subtle but decisive. It signals readiness, public presence, participation. The final layer settles into place, and with it comes a sense of inevitability. Stepping into the corridor, you feel the house receive you again, recognizing the figure you present. Servants will see not the individual beneath, but the outline they expect. Strangers will do the same. The clothes will speak first, long before you do. As you move forward, the gentle weight of fabric remains constant, a reminder with every step. The role cannot be shrugged off or loosened. It accompanies you everywhere, shaping the day before it unfolds, steady and unyielding. And so you proceed, dressed not merely for the world, but for the quiet performance that will last from morning until night, the armour of respectability carrying you onward, polished, proper, and carefully contained. The house guides you forward without direction, its corridors narrowing gently until the dining room opens before you. Light enters here more deliberately, softened by tall windows and drawn curtains that allow only what is proper to pass through. The table waits at the centre, long and polished, its surface reflecting the ceiling above like still water. Nothing on it appears accidental. Everything has been placed with intention, aligned to a standard that existed long before you arrived. You take your seat where you're expected to sit, though no one has ever explained why that particular chair belongs to you. The wood beneath your hand is smooth, worn by decades of similar mornings, by generations who sat upright and silent, performing this same quiet ceremony. The chair does not invite comfort, it encourages attentiveness. The faint clink of porcelain announces the presence of breakfast without spectacle. Cups and plates appear as if the room itself has produced them. Steam rises gently from tea poured with careful restraint, the scent mild and familiar. Toast rests neatly stacked, its edges browned evenly. Butter sits shaped and unmelted, disciplined even in its softness. Nothing here demands attention, and yet everything demands respect. You straighten instinctively as you reach for your napkin, unfolding it across your lap with practiced precision. The fabric is crisp, cool against your fingers. You are aware of the sound it makes, even though it is barely audible. Sound matters here. Silence is not emptiness. It is a standard. Silverware waits on either side of your plate, gleaming but subdued. When you lift your knife, the metal feels balanced and reassuringly heavy. The first touch against the plate produces a faint whisper, just enough to register. You notice it immediately. Every sound feels amplified in this quiet, though no one reacts. The absence of reaction is itself instructive. Across the table, others sit with similar composure, faces arranged into expressions of mild attentiveness. Eyes lift briefly, then lower again. Conversation does not begin right away. Words, like everything else, must wait for permission. When someone does speak, it is measured and restrained, offered softly and received politely, then allowed to dissolve back into silence. You take a sip of tea. The warmth spreads slowly, controlled, never rushed. Even the act of drinking seems guided by invisible rules. Small sips, no sound, cup returned to its saucer without haste. You are aware of your posture as you eat, of the angle of your elbows, of the pace at which your hands move. These details have become second nature, learned not through instruction, but through observation and quiet correction. Judgment here is not spoken. It resides in the air, gentle but persistent. It notices if your spoon lingers too long above the bowl, if your gaze drifts toward the window for more than a moment, if your shoulders soften even slightly. Nothing dramatic would happen if you failed. There would be no reprimand. That is the brilliance of it. Disapproval would settle instead, subtle and lasting, like dust on a polished surface. You chew carefully, aware of the rhythm of eating, the spaces between bites. Appetite is permitted, but enthusiasm is not. Hunger must be satisfied politely, without revealing itself too clearly. You stop eating before you feel full, because fullness suggests indulgence, and indulgence belongs elsewhere, if anywhere, at all. A servant moves quietly along the edge of the room, refilling cups with steady hands. Their presence is unobtrusive, almost ghost-like, yet you feel it distinctly. Eyes are lowered, movements efficient. They see everything and acknowledge nothing. Their silence reinforces yours, a shared understanding of roles that will never be discussed. The room smells faintly of brewed tea, warm bread, and polished wood. These scents blend into something comforting, almost soothing. There is pleasure here, though it is carefully filtered, stripped of anything that might feel excessive. You enjoy the meal, but only within the narrow boundaries allowed. As you eat, your thoughts remain equally restrained. There is no room for reflection or wandering ideas. Breakfast is not a time for introspection. It is a time for presentation, for proving once again that you belong to this order, that you understand its rules without needing to be reminded. A comment is made about the weather, delivered in a tone that suggests mild interest rather than concern. You respond appropriately, matching the level of engagement, careful not to elevate the subject or dismiss it. The exchange ends naturally, neither awkward nor warm. It exists simply to confirm participation. You notice how quickly the meal progresses, not because it feels rushed, but because efficiency has been woven into the ritual. Lingering would imply leisure, and leisure at this hour would be suspicious. Mornings are for readiness, for setting the tone of the day, not for comfort. When your plate is cleared, you feel a subtle release, though you cannot say why. Perhaps it is the knowledge that you have performed adequately, that nothing out of place has occurred. Perhaps it is simply relief at having passed another quiet examination without incident. The last sip of tea is taken deliberately. The cup is set down with care. The napkin is folded neatly, placed beside the plate in a way that suggests finality without flair. You rise only when it feels appropriate to do so, neither too early nor too late. Timing here is intuitive, learned through years of observation and silent correction. As you stand, the chair makes a faint sound against the floor. You pause for a fraction of a second, ensuring it is minimal, controlled. The room remains calm. No one looks up. Approval, if it exists, is expressed through absence. You take one last glance at the table, now partly cleared, its surface already returning to its original state of order. Breakfast leaves little trace, much like everything else in this world. The moment has passed, absorbed into routine, its significance quietly acknowledged and then forgotten. Stepping away, you feel the familiar settling of composure once more. The meal has done its work. You are fed, yes, but more importantly, you are aligned. The day can proceed now, supported by this careful beginning, carried forward by silence, judgment, and the calm assurance that everything remains exactly as it should be. You leave the dining room without ceremony, moving along corridors that seem to anticipate your steps. The house is awake now, fully alert in its quiet way, breathing through vents and stairwells, listening through doors left just slightly ajar. Light shifts as you walk, filtered through high windows and transoms, softened by lace and heavy drapery that allow illumination but deny intimacy. Every passage feels purposeful, as though it has been designed not merely to connect rooms, but to guide behaviour. Your footsteps are absorbed by carpets, woven thick enough to swallow sound. Even so, you walk carefully. Silence is not an absence here, it is a shared agreement. The walls are lined with portraits, faces arranged in solemn order, gazes directed outward with practiced neutrality. They have been watching for years. You pass beneath them with the mild awareness that they represent a standard rather than a memory. Their presence reminds you that the house did not begin with you, and it will not end when you are gone. A servant crosses the hall ahead of you, moving smoothly, eyes lowered, body angled just enough to acknowledge your presence without intruding upon it. There is a choreography to these encounters, refined through repetition. You do not speak, neither do they. Words would disrupt the balance. The house functions best when everyone understands their place without discussion. As you turn a corner, a door opens quietly and closes again behind you. The sound is barely perceptible, but you register it immediately. The house records these small events, storing them somewhere beyond your reach. You are not alone here, even when you are alone. Rooms open and close around you like measured thoughts. A drawing room holds its furniture in careful alignment, chairs angled toward one another as if awaiting conversation that will never quite happen. A library smells faintly of leather and dust, shelves heavy with volumes that suggest scholarship without encouraging curiosity. Books here are symbols first, companions second. You run a finger lightly along a spine as you pass, feeling the texture without stopping. Lingering would feel indulgent. You pause near a window and look out briefly. The view is orderly, garden paths trimmed precisely, hedges squared, gravel raked smooth. Nature has been allowed in, but only after it agreed to behave. The glass cools your fingertips. Outside feels distant, not forbidden, but carefully separated. The house prefers boundaries. As you move deeper into it, you become aware of how little space truly belongs to you. Bedrooms are maintained by others. Sitting rooms are shared by design. Corridors belong to everyone and no one. Even the study, with its heavy desk and neatly stacked papers, feels provisional, as though it has been loaned to you under certain conditions. You occupy these spaces, but you do not possess them. You step into the study now, closing the door softly behind you. For a moment, the quiet deepens, and something like privacy seems possible. Yet even here, the feeling is incomplete. The desk has been arranged already, papers aligned, pen placed just so. Someone has been here before you, preparing the room for your use. Their absence is as noticeable as their presence would have been. You sit, adjusting the chair until it feels correct, not comfortable. The leather creaks faintly, then settles. On the desk, correspondence waits, neatly stacked, tied with ribbon. The contents are familiar: invitations, obligations, reminders of dinners to attend, and letters to answer. Each envelope represents another small thread binding you to the world beyond these walls. As you reach for a letter, you sense movement outside the door. Footsteps pass, pause briefly, then continue. No knock comes, none is needed. The house acknowledges your presence without interrupting it. Even in stillness, you are accounted for. You open the letter and read it slowly, not because it requires careful thought, but because reading quickly would appear hurried. Time here is measured not by urgency, but by propriety. When you finish, you place it back on the desk, aligning it with the others. Disorder would suggest distraction. Distraction would suggest something unsaid. The clock on the mantel ticks softly, its rhythm steady and unyielding. It does not rush you, but it does not forget you either. Each second marks your continued participation in this controlled environment. You glance at it without moving your head too much. Even looking at the time has its etiquette. When you stand again, the house seems to adjust around you. Doors open smoothly. A servant appears just long enough to remove a cup you had not realized you were finished with. Their timing is impeccable. They have been watching or listening or simply knowing. It is difficult to tell which. You walk past rooms filled with objects, chosen to communicate stability. Sideboards polished daily, vases arranged with fresh flowers that never smell too strong, clocks synchronized to the same quiet pulse. Everything reinforces the impression that nothing unexpected happens here. And yet beneath that calm, there is the faint awareness that deviation would be noticed instantly. Privacy, you realize, is not the absence of others, but the permission to be unobserved. That permission is never fully granted. Even when doors are closed, the house remembers you are inside. It waits. It listens. You pause at the foot of the staircase, resting a hand on the banister. The wood is smooth, worn by generations of similar hands, all moving with the same measured restraint. Above you, the upper floors hold their own quiet routines. Below, the household continues its work, unseen but ever present. The house operates as a single, coordinated body, and you are one part within it. As you ascend, the light changes again, dimming slightly, encouraging a slower pace. You take each step carefully, aware of the sound it makes, the space it occupies. Even movement feels like a statement here. The walls narrow subtly, guiding you forward, reminding you that wandering is unnecessary. At the top, you stop briefly, looking down into the space you have just crossed. From here, the house appears calm, orderly, benevolent. It offers comfort, warmth, protection from the unpredictability beyond its doors. It asks very little in return, only awareness, only compliance, only the quiet surrender of solitude. You continue on, moving deeper into its carefully maintained rhythm. The house watches, not with malice, but with expectation. And as you walk through it, composed and attentive, you understand that being seen is not an event here. It is a condition. The front door closes behind you with a sound so soft it feels rehearsed. Outside, the air meets you differently than it did indoors. It carries weight. Coal smoke lingers low and steady, not sharp enough to offend, not light enough to escape notice. Beneath it lies the damp scent of stone, iron railings cooling overnight, brick walls holding yesterday's rain. The city exhales slowly, and you breathe it in without reaction. Your hat settles firmly as you step forward, brim angled just so. It shades your eyes without hiding them. Hiding would appear evasive. You straighten instinctively, spine aligned, shoulders relaxed but controlled. Posture here is not about comfort or confidence. It is about legibility. You must be read correctly at a distance. The pavement stretches ahead in long orderly lines. Boots strike stone with a muted rhythm, neither hurried nor idle. You are careful with your pace. Too fast would suggest anxiety or urgency. Too slow would hint at leisure unbecoming at this hour. The ideal speed exists somewhere between, measured not by distance but by impression. As you walk, you become aware of how many eyes exist without seeming to look. Shopkeepers adjust items in windows as you pass. A carriage rolls by, wheels hissing softly against the street. Somewhere nearby, a newspaper seller calls out headlines, voice restrained, trained not to disturb too much. The sound reaches you, then fades, absorbed by the architecture. Your gaze remains forward, occasionally lifting to take in buildings, without lingering. Looking too closely would appear curious. Looking away too often would suggest distraction. You allow your eyes to rest on doorways, signs, passing figures, all without attachment. The city reveals itself best when you do not seem interested in it. Stone facades rise on either side, soot darkened yet dignified. their age worn evenly rather than decayed. These streets were not built for spontaneity. They were built to endure, to contain lives that moved predictably between home, office, club, and church. You fit easily into this pattern, another figure aligned with its geometry. A gentleman approaches from the opposite direction. You register him immediately. There is a brief adjustment of posture on both sides, subtle and simultaneous. Hats tip just enough to acknowledge existence without invitation. The moment passes cleanly. Neither of you slows, neither of you looks back. Mutual recognition has been completed. You pass women walking in pairs, voices low, gloved hands resting lightly on umbrellas. They glance toward you briefly, then away. The exchange is fleeting and formal, governed by rules that do not require explanation. Distance is maintained, respect is preserved, nothing more is permitted, and nothing more is expected. Crossing a street requires timing rather than haste. You wait as a carriage passes, allowing space, demonstrating patience. When you step off the curb, your movement is decisive. Hesitation would appear uncertain. The street accommodates you as you cross, traffic flowing around your presence without disruption. The soundscape shifts subtly as you move. Footsteps echo differently under archways. Voices fade and return. Somewhere a clock strikes the hour, its chime steady and restrained. Counting time without emotion. You feel it rather than hear it, a reminder that the day is progressing whether you acknowledge it or not. You pass a group of labourers gathered near a building site. Their clothes are darker, heavier with use. Their posture tells a different story, one shaped by weight and repetition. They glance at you briefly, then return to their work. The separation between you is understood without words. You continue on, maintaining your pace, neither accelerating nor slowing. Shop windows reflect your figure as you pass. The image is fleeting but precise. Hat level, coat falling correctly, hands gloved, stride even. You do not stop to examine yourself. Self-examination belongs indoors. Outside, presentation is assumed. The city offers countless details, but you absorb them selectively. The smell of fresh bread escapes briefly from a bakery door before being reclaimed by smoke. A horse stamps impatiently, leather harness creaking softly. Iron lampposts stand at attention, soot-streaked but upright. All of it forms a backdrop rather than a destination. You are aware of how space opens and closes around you. Wider streets encourage a slightly broader stride. Narrower ones require containment. You adjust without thinking, body responding to environment as though trained for it. In many ways it has been. Passing through a small square, you notice trees trimmed into careful shapes, their leaves holding the faint dampness of morning. A bench sits empty. You do not consider sitting. Public rest is a performance that requires context, and this is not the moment. There is comfort in the predictability of the route. Streets unfold as expected. Corners arrive when they should. Nothing surprises you. Surprise would be unsettling, and the city understands this. It reveals itself gradually, offering continuity rather than interruption. You feel the faint weight of observation again, though nothing overt has changed. People see you without staring. They register you as part of the scene, neither remarkable nor out of place. This is success. To stand out would require explanation. To disappear would raise questions. As you approach your destination, whatever form it may take, your pace remains unchanged. Arrival should not be announced by acceleration. You allow the city to bring you there naturally, step by measured step. The air grows slightly cooler near taller buildings, shadows lingering longer between stone walls. You adjust your coat subtly, a small movement that maintains comfort without display. Even this feels practiced, refined through repetition. When you pause briefly at an intersection, waiting for the flow to shift, you stand still with intention. Stillness too must look correct. Weight balanced evenly, Hands relaxed, gaze forward. You appear to be waiting for nothing in particular, which is precisely the point. As you move on again, the city continues its quiet exchange with you, offering passage without promise. You walk not to explore, not to wander, but to be seen moving correctly through the world that expects you. Each step reinforces that expectation, carrying you onward through streets that recognize you not as an individual, but as a figure shaped to fit their order. And so you continue, measured and composed, leaving only the faintest trace behind, absorbed into the steady rhythm of stone, smoke, and restrained motion. The street narrows slightly as you approach the entrance, as if the city itself is guiding you inward. The building does not announce itself loudly. Its facade is restrained, brick and stone arranged with confidence that does not require explanation. A discreet plaque beside the door bears a name familiar enough to feel permanent, though you rarely think about it. The door opens with minimal effort, as though it has been expecting you. Inside, the air changes immediately. The coal smoke thins, replaced by the scent of leather, old paper, and something faintly medicinal. Perhaps the polish used on wood that has been handled for decades. Sound settles into a lower register here. Voices soften without instruction. Footsteps lose their urgency. The club absorbs excess energy and returns only what is acceptable. You remove your hat and coat with practiced efficiency, handing them off without comment. The exchange is silent and complete. You step farther in, shoes meeting thick carpet that mutes your movement entirely. The room opens before you in layers, chairs arranged in careful groupings, tables bearing newspapers folded precisely, lamps casting warm pools of light that never quite overlap. Men sit scattered throughout, each occupying space without appearing to claim it. They look up briefly as you enter, offering nods that register recognition without enthusiasm. Faces resemble one another in subtle ways, not identical, but shaped by similar expectations. Hair neatly kept, moustaches trimmed, expressions calm, thoughtful, mildly distant. You choose a chair that feels familiar, though you cannot remember the first time you sat in it. The leather yields slightly beneath you, warm from previous use, creaking softly in acknowledgement. Comfort here is deliberate, engineered to soothe without encouraging collapse. You sit upright, allowing yourself just enough relaxation to suggest ease, but not enough to suggest abandon. A table nearby holds the day's papers. You reach for one, unfolding it slowly, aware of the sound it makes. The rustle is acceptable, even expected, but must not become disruptive. Headlines glance back at you with restrained urgency. Events unfold beyond these walls, distant and abstract. You read without urgency, absorbing information without reaction. A server appears at your side almost immediately, offering tea or something stronger. You accept with a nod. The drink arrives promptly, placed exactly where your hand will naturally fall. You lift the cup and take a measured sip. The warmth spreads gently, steadying rather than exciting. Everything here is designed to maintain equilibrium. Around you, conversation drifts in low currents. Topics rise and fall without intensity. Politics is discussed as though it were weather. Business is mentioned without specifics. Opinions are expressed carefully, framed as observations rather than convictions. Agreement is frequent, disagreement subtle enough to be mistaken for nuance. You listen more than you speak, though when you do contribute, your voice matches the room's tone effortlessly. Words are chosen for their neutrality. Humour appears occasionally, dry and precise, eliciting brief smiles rather than laughter. Excessive amusement would feel out of place. The club prefers recognition over delight. As time passes, you become aware of how similar the rhythms are. Pages turn, cups are lifted and set down, chairs shift slightly, then return to stillness. The sameness is not dull, it is reassuring. Variety, would require explanation. Here, familiarity is the highest compliment. A man nearby leans back just enough to signal relaxation, then stops before crossing into slouching. You notice this without meaning to. Everyone notices everything, quietly, without comment. Correction happens internally, guided by observation rather than instruction. Portraits line the walls, depicting former members captured in oil and shadow. They gaze out with composed expressions, eyes suggesting confidence tempered by restraint. You recognize the look. It mirrors the one you practice daily. These men are no longer present, yet they continue to set the tone. Their approval is implied, never granted outright. The fire crackles softly in the hearth, more for atmosphere than warmth. Flames are contained behind a grate, their movement decorative rather than threatening. You watch them briefly, allowing your thoughts to slow. Even contemplation here follows a pattern. You think about nothing in particular, which feels like the correct thing to do. A discussion nearby shifts gently toward travel. Destinations are mentioned, experiences summarized efficiently. No one lingers on discomfort or delight. Everything is presented as manageable, instructive, appropriate. The world beyond the club is acknowledged, but only at a distance, as though viewed through glass. You realize how little of yourself is required here. No explanation, no defense, no confession. Your presence alone confirms belonging. This is the club's greatest comfort. It asks nothing personal, nothing revealing. It accepts the version of you that arrives fully dressed and properly aligned. And yet beneath this ease, there is a subtle pressure. Standing apart would be noticeable. Speaking too passionately would draw attention. Remaining silent too long might suggest withdrawal. The balance must be maintained, moment by moment, without visible effort. You shift in your chair, crossing your legs carefully, aware of how even this small movement communicates something. The leather responds with a faint sound, then settles. The room remains unchanged. No one looks, or perhaps everyone does, briefly, without registering it consciously. Time passes differently here. The clock on the wall ticks, but it feels ornamental. Hours drift by without urgency. The outside world continues its noise and motion, but within these walls, time folds neatly, stacked like newspapers, waiting to be read. When you finally rise, it is without announcement. You finish your drink, set the cup down precisely, fold the paper, and leave it where it belongs. The chair remembers you, retaining your shape for a moment before smoothing itself back into neutrality. As you collect your coat and hat, you feel the familiar settling of the role once more. The club has done its work. It has reinforced the boundaries, soothed any friction, reminded you of the comfort found in similarity. You step back toward the door, posture steady, expression composed. Outside waits the city again, unpredictable yet contained. You pause briefly before leaving, feeling the contrast already forming. The club remains behind you, unchanged, ready to receive you again whenever the world feels too sharp or too varied. You step out, carrying with you the quiet reassurance of belonging, and the equally quiet knowledge that within those leather chairs and low murmurs, individuality is softened into something safer, smoother, and far less complicated. The air inside still clings to you as you move on, carrying the softened warmth of leather and polished wood, the residue of voices that never quite rose above themselves. When conversation resumes around you, it does so gently, as if no one wishes to be responsible for beginning it. Words appear not as declarations, but as offerings, placed carefully between people, and then left untouched. You take your place among others once more, standing or sitting where it feels natural, which is to say, where it feels correct. Someone nearby remarks on the quality of the light outside, how it has shifted slightly since morning. You acknowledge this with a nod and a sentence that agrees without adding weight. The exchange settles comfortably, like a book returned to its shelf. Here, Speech is a surface activity. It glides rather than dives. Questions are asked, but only those that can be answered without exposure. Statements are made, but none that demand response beyond recognition. You have learned this language well. It allows you to speak continuously while revealing almost nothing. Your voice takes on the tone you reserve for such moments. Calm, even, faintly detached. You describe events in terms of impressions rather than reactions. A meeting was productive, a journey was uneventful. The weather has been agreeable, though perhaps a touch persistent. Each phrase carries meaning without consequence. When others speak, you listen attentively, eyes focused just enough to suggest interest. You respond with measured affirmations, brief additions, that keep the conversation moving without redirecting it. The goal is not discovery, but maintenance. Conversation here exists to confirm alignment, not to challenge it. A man across from you recounts a recent dinner, listing the guests and the courses served. The story unfolds without emphasis. You comment on the menu, noting the choice of wine, the balance of flavors. No mention is made of the mood, the tensions, the silences that must have existed between bites. Such details would be unnecessary, possibly inappropriate. You notice how easily emotion is translated into abstraction. Satisfaction becomes adequacy. Displeasure becomes inconvenience. Concern becomes curiosity. There is a shared understanding that feelings, left unfiltered, are unpredictable things. Better to describe them indirectly, through metaphor or observation, until they lose their edge. You find yourself speaking more than you realize, yet nothing you say feels substantial. Words fill the space efficiently, smoothing over pauses before they become uncomfortable. Silence is allowed, but only briefly. Extended quiet might invite thought, and thought might lead somewhere unsanctioned. When laughter appears, it is restrained, more a signal than a reaction. A smile curves briefly, then fades. Humor is permitted here, but only the kind that reassures rather than disrupts. Wit is admired. Earnestness is tolerated. Passion is quietly redirected. You mention a book you have been reading, careful to frame it as an intellectual exercise rather than a personal interest. Others respond in kind, offering titles, authors, opinions softened by qualifiers. No one admits to being moved. No one suggests that a sentence lingered longer than expected. As the exchange continues, you become aware of how much effort goes into sounding effortless. Each phrase is weighed before it leaves your mouth, assessed for tone, relevance, and safety. You have practiced this long enough that the process feels automatic, though the concentration it requires never fully disappears. There are moments when something almost slips through. A word pauses at the edge of honesty. A thought threatens to form fully, but training intervenes. You adjust, rephrase, redirect. The moment passes, unnoticed by others, smoothed back into acceptability. You observe the same pattern repeating around you. Everyone participates, everyone performs. The room hums softly, with carefully curated speech, each voice contributing to a collective calm. No one interrupts, no one dominates. Equality here is measured not by opinion, but by restraint. Occasionally, someone ventures slightly closer to the edge. A remark hints at frustration. A sentence carries a trace of weariness. These moments are acknowledged politely, then gently guided back to safer ground. A change of subject, a light comment, balance restored. You realize how comforting this can be. There is safety in knowing that nothing asked of you will require an honest answer. There is relief in understanding that your interior life can remain undisturbed, untouched by inquiry. Conversation becomes a shield, translucent but effective. And yet beneath that comfort there is a faint sense of narrowing. With each practiced exchange, the space for unguarded speech grows smaller. Words shape thought as much as they conceal it. Over time, you begin to think in the same careful patterns you speak, editing yourself before ideas fully form. You notice how rarely names are spoken with affection, how seldom anyone refers to themselves directly. The first person appears only when necessary, and even then, it is softened, distanced. One finds, someone says, instead of, "I feel," you recognize the maneuver immediately. You have used it yourself countless times. As the conversation drifts, it never settles. Topics change seamlessly, guided by subtle cues no one acknowledges openly. A glance toward a window, a pause too long, a shift in posture. The group adjusts instinctively, maintaining flow without friction. You contribute another observation, something about the state of affairs, framed broadly enough to invite agreement. Heads nod. Someone adds a similar thought. The exchange concludes without resolution, because resolution was never the point. Time stretches gently, marked only by the rhythm of voices rising and falling. You are aware of yourself as a participant rather than a presence, a voice among voices, distinct but not singular. The effect is soothing, almost hypnotic. Eventually the conversation thins, not because it ends, but because it disperses. People drift slightly apart, drawn by other obligations, other rooms, other equally careful exchanges. You remain where you are for a moment, listening to the fading murmur. In the quiet that follows, you feel the familiar mixture of ease and absence. You have spoken well. You have revealed nothing. The performance has been successful, and yet there is a faint impression of something unsaid lingering in the air, something that never quite finds the words it would require. You straighten, adjust your posture, and prepare to move on, carrying with you the practiced calm of a voice that has learned to speak endlessly without ever confessing a thing. The murmur of voices thins as bodies rearrange themselves around tables dressed in linen, too pale to invite stains. Chairs slide back with careful restraint, their legs guided rather than dragged. You find a place without searching for it, guided by an instinct sharpened through repetition. The room smells faintly of warm bread, roasted meat, and something sharper beneath it all. The promise of alcohol held in reserve. Light falls generously here, but not freely. It is filtered through tall windows and sheer curtains, softened until it loses any harshness. The brightness suggests openness, yet nothing about the arrangement encourages excess. Plates are set with precision. Glasses wait empty, clear and expectant. Cutlery lies in careful symmetry, aligned with a seriousness that suggests this is not merely a meal, but a demonstration. You sit, folding yourself into the chair, with practiced ease. There is comfort here, undeniable and intentional. The seat cushions yield just enough to suggest indulgence, but not enough to invite lingering. Everything is calibrated, even pleasure has been measured. A servant approaches, offering water first. You accept. Hydration before indulgence. The glass is cool against your fingers. Condensation beading briefly before disappearing. You drink slowly, letting the act feel purposeful rather than reflexive. Conversation resumes in low tones, circling safely familiar ground. No one speaks of hunger, though it exists. No one mentions anticipation, though it hums quietly beneath the surface. Appetite, like emotion, is something to be managed, not displayed. The first course arrives without announcement. Soup steaming gently, its aroma contained and refined. You lift your spoon carefully, aware of the angle of your wrist, the pace of your movement. The taste is pleasing, layered, subtle. You allow yourself to register this fact without responding to it physically. No sigh, no visible satisfaction. Enjoyment here is internal, silent. Bread follows, broken neatly rather than torn. Butter spreads evenly without haste. You notice how everyone eats at roughly the same pace, guided by some unspoken rhythm. Falling behind would draw attention. Finishing too early would suggest impatience. You adjust naturally, matching the room. Wine appears midway through the meal, poured into glasses that catch the light softly. The colour is rich but restrained, deep without being dramatic. You lift the glass and inhale briefly, enough to acknowledge the scent without lingering. The first sip is measured. The warmth spreads gently, touching the edges of awareness without disturbing it. Alcohol here is not an escape. It is an accent. It loosens conversation slightly, allowing remarks to land with marginally more ease, smiles to linger a fraction longer. But the boundary remains firm. No one drinks quickly, no one refills their own glass. You feel the subtle shift within yourself as the wine settles. The edges of thought soften just enough to feel pleasant. This, too, is part of the design. Controlled indulgence reinforces the idea that you are capable of enjoying restraint itself. The main course arrives, presented neatly, portions generous enough to satisfy without excess. Meat is tender, vegetables cooked precisely, flavours balanced. You eat steadily, pausing occasionally to lift your glass or listen to a remark from across the table. The food grounds you, anchoring you briefly in the physical world without allowing you to dwell there. There is a faint humour in the way indulgence is permitted only within these boundaries. You're encouraged to enjoy, but only in ways that confirm your discipline. Pleasure becomes another test, another opportunity to demonstrate mastery over impulse. Conversation grows marginally warmer as the meal progresses. Observations carry a hint of personal inflection, though never enough to suggest vulnerability. A comment about travel lingers slightly longer than necessary. A remark about business is delivered with a trace of fatigue. These are noted, then smoothed over, absorbed into the steady flow. Dessert arrives, lighter than expected, a deliberate choice. Sweetness is allowed, but not to the point of distraction. You taste it carefully, appreciating the texture, the balance. Sugar here is not meant to excite, only to conclude. A small glass of something stronger is offered afterward, brandy, perhaps, or a liqueur. You accept if it feels appropriate. Declining would require explanation. Enthusiasm would require restraint. The liquid burns faintly as you sip, a reminder of its power. You take no more than necessary. The glass rests untouched after that, its presence symbolic. As plates are cleared, you feel the gentle settling that follows a well-managed meal. Hunger has been addressed. Desire has been acknowledged and contained. The room exhales quietly, satisfied with its own performance. You sit back slightly, not reclining, but allowing a hint of ease into your posture. This is the approved moment for relaxation. You notice how everyone else mirrors the same adjustment, almost simultaneously. The synchronization is comforting, if faintly unsettling. Coffee is served, dark and aromatic, its bitterness cutting through the lingering richness of the meal. You drink it slowly, appreciating its clarity. It sharpens the mind again, restoring balance. Indulgence is never allowed to linger too long. As the final cups are set down, the meal dissolves without ceremony. There is no lingering over the table, no indulgent conversation stretching beyond its usefulness. The purpose has been served. Bodies are fed, boundaries reaffirmed. You rise when it feels right, neither rushed nor reluctant. The room accepts the movement without comment. Chairs return to place. Linen remains unwrinkled. The space resets itself quickly, as if the meal were never meant to leave a trace. As you move away, you carry with you the faint warmth of wine, the memory of flavour, and the reassurance that enjoyment, when properly contained, can be another form of order. The day continues, steady and composed, guided by the quiet certainty that even pleasure has its place, and that place is firmly within control. The warmth of the meal fades gradually as you return to movement, the body settling back into its familiar alignment. Outside the dining room, the air feels cooler, steadier, as if reminding you that nourishment was never meant to linger. Coats are adjusted, hats retrieved, brief courtesies exchanged without emphasis. Soon enough, you are carried along familiar routes, towards spaces where purpose is implied rather than defined. Work awaits, though it rarely announces itself as such. It exists. In rooms that smell of paper and ink, in corridors lined with notice boards and portraits, in offices where desks face windows, not for inspiration but for supervision. You arrive without ceremony, greeted by nods that confirm recognition rather than welcome. The day resumes its measured pace around you. Your workspace is already prepared. Papers lie stacked neatly, correspondence arranged in careful order. Someone else has aligned them, anticipating your arrival, ensuring that no task begins in disorder. You sit, adjusting the chair slightly until it supports your back correctly. Comfort here is secondary to appearance. A man who slouches invites questions, even if no one asks them aloud. The work itself unfolds quietly. Letters are read, marked, placed aside. Figures are reviewed, not with urgency, but with consistency. Decisions are made incrementally, rarely dramatically. The goal is not progress in any meaningful sense, but continuity. Everything must look as though it has always been this way, and always will be. You sign documents with a steady hand, aware of the weight carried by your name, more than by the content itself. Ink dries quickly on the page, sealing agreements that maintain relationships, confirm expectations, and ensure that nothing shifts too far from its accustomed position. The act feels ceremonial, though it is repeated daily. Around you, others perform similar motions. Pens scratch softly, papers move from one pile to another, clocks tick with patient insistence. There is no rush. Urgency would suggest instability, and instability is the one thing this environment cannot tolerate. Occasionally, a conversation occurs, brief and precise. Information is exchanged without embellishment. Questions are phrased carefully, answers delivered in tones that suggest cooperation rather than curiosity. You notice how often phrases begin with "it appears" or "one might observe," distancing the speaker from responsibility. Direct statements are avoided unless they confirm what is already assumed. You glance out the window, not because there is something to see, but because the motion itself feels appropriate. Outside, the city continues its quiet labour. Carts move steadily, figures cross streets in orderly patterns, smoke rises and disperses. Everything appears functional, purposeful, unquestioned. The view reassures you. It mirrors the structure inside. The hours pass without clear markers. Time is measured here by tasks completed rather than minutes elapsed. When a letter is answered, when a ledger is balanced, when a meeting concludes without disruption, the day advances imperceptibly. You rarely feel satisfaction, but you rarely feel dissatisfaction either. The absence of friction is the intended outcome. There is a subtle irony in how little creation occurs. You are not building something new, you are tending to something old, ensuring it remains intact. The work resembles maintenance more than invention, preservation rather than progress. Yet it carries the weight of importance, reinforced by routine and repetition. You attend a meeting in a room arranged to discourage strong feeling. Chairs are placed evenly, the table is broad enough to create distance. Light enters indirectly, avoiding harsh contrasts. Discussion proceeds along predictable lines. Everyone present understands the boundaries. Proposals are softened. Objections are reframed as concerns. Conclusions are deferred until consensus appears naturally, which is to say, until nothing threatens the existing order. You contribute when appropriate, offering remarks that clarify without challenging. Your voice fits the room. You speak neither too much nor too little. Balance is everything. When the meeting ends, there is no sense of accomplishment, only relief that nothing has gone wrong. Returning to your desk, you notice how little of yourself is required to continue. The role carries you forward. Habit fills the gaps. Thought becomes procedural, action repetitive. It is efficient, soothing even, in its predictability. At moments, a question brushes against the edge of awareness. Why this matters, who benefits, what would happen if something were done differently? These thoughts arrive quietly, without urgency, and depart just as easily. There is no place for them here. The environment absorbs doubt as readily as sound, leaving behind only what is acceptable. A visitor arrives briefly, delivering news framed carefully to avoid alarm. You listen, not make a note. The matter will be addressed, which in practice means it will be folded into existing processes until it loses its sharpness. Problems are not solved so much as neutralized. As afternoon light shifts, you adjust the lamp on your desk, angling it just enough to maintain clarity. The gesture feels symbolic, though you do not dwell on it. Small adjustments sustain the illusion that everything remains under control. When a document resists easy classification, you pause, then place it aside. Ambiguity can wait. There is always time later to resolve what does not fit neatly now. The system rewards patience more than decisiveness. You become aware of fatigue, not physical, but mental, a gentle dulling rather than a strain. It is the exhaustion that comes from maintaining consistency, from holding a shape that must not bend. You straighten slightly, reasserting posture. The feeling recedes. Eventually tasks diminish. Papers are filed, pens are capped. The desk returns to its prepared state, ready for the next day. Nothing remains that would suggest effort or difficulty. The illusion is complete. As you rise, you glance once more around the room. It looks unchanged, as though you had never been there. This, you realize, is the measure of success, to work all day and leave no trace, to labor in service of a structure that draws strength from appearing effortless. You step away, carrying with you the quiet knowledge that your work has accomplished exactly what it was meant to do. The world remains orderly, questions remain unasked, and the illusion, carefully maintained, continues to hold. By the time you find yourself in rooms where women are present, the day has already trained you into a particular stillness. Your body knows how to pause before reacting, how to soften expression, how to measure distance instinctively. These spaces feel different, not louder or quieter, but more carefully arranged, as if every object, every chair, every interval between people has been placed to prevent something unnamed from happening. The room smells faintly of perfume, layered over polished wood and fresh fabric. Flowers sit arranged in vases, chosen for their restraint rather than their abundance. Light is encouraged here, allowed to linger on faces and sleeves, but never harsh enough to reveal too much. You enter with composure already in place, aware that you are being seen in a different way now, not as a peer or colleague, but as a figure whose behaviour carries implications beyond itself. Introductions occur with precision. Names are offered, received, remembered. Hands meet briefly, gloved or bare, the contact light and fleeting. You feel the exact moment when touch becomes inappropriate, and you withdraw before reaching it. The rules are so deeply embedded that they no longer feel like rules. They feel like instinct. Conversation begins with safe terrain. Music, weather, travel, spoken of abstractly. Compliments are delivered carefully, aimed at taste rather than appearance. You admire a choice of colour, a well-arranged room, a performance attended weeks ago. Direct admiration would feel too sharp, too personal. Everything must pass through layers of civility before it is allowed to exist. You are aware of eyes meeting yours, then sliding away politely. Glances linger, just long enough to be acknowledged, never long enough to be accused. Desire, if it exists, is translated immediately into something acceptable. Interest becomes attentiveness. Curiosity becomes courtesy. The transformation happens so quickly, it is almost invisible. You notice how posture shifts subtly in these exchanges. You stand slightly straighter, movements more deliberate. Your voice lowers a fraction, softens its edges. This is not seduction in any obvious sense. It is calibration. You adjust yourself to fit the narrow channel permitted. Laughter appears, gentle and contained. When it does, it carries relief more than amusement. Humour here must be clean, indirect, often self-effacing. Wit is allowed, charm tolerated, intensity discouraged. Anything that suggests urgency is quietly smoothed over. You sense the presence of boundaries everywhere. Chairs are placed at careful distances. Conversations occur in pairs or small groups, never truly private. Even when voice is lower, the space itself seems to listen. Doors remain open, windows remain uncovered. Transparency is enforced not to encourage honesty, but to prevent it. When you speak to a woman at length, you learn to say much without approaching anything that matters. You describe your work without revealing investment. You speak of your interests without admitting passion. You mention family without emotion. The exchange becomes a dance of implication, each step practiced, each pause intentional. You notice how quickly silence is filled. A pause longer than a few seconds feels dangerous, as though it might invite something unscripted. So you comment on the room, the arrangement of flowers, the quality of light. She responds in kind, equally skilled, equally contained. Both of you understand the necessity of keeping the surface intact. There are moments when something presses faintly against that surface. A shared glance held just a fraction longer than required. A tone that warms briefly before cooling again. These moments are fleeting, immediately corrected. Neither of you acknowledges them. Acknowledgement would transform them into something that requires consequence. You become aware of how much effort goes into protecting reputation, not only hers, but yours. Every gesture must be defensible. Every word must sound innocent if repeated later. The world beyond these rooms is attentive, eager to interpret, to judge. Etiquette serves as both shield and cage, offering safety at the cost of sincerity. Physical closeness is managed carefully. You walk together, but not too closely. You sit nearby, but not adjacent unless circumstances demand it. Even then, bodies remain angled away slightly, as if reminding themselves of distance. Proximity is permitted only when it can be explained. You realize how little room there is for honesty. Direct feeling has no place to settle. There are no words available for it that do not immediately feel excessive or improper. Emotion must be diluted into suggestion, into metaphor, into silence. You think briefly of how different this might feel without the constant presence of rules. The thought is faint and quickly dismissed. Such imagining serves no purpose here. The structure is too well established, too deeply woven into daily life. To step outside it would require more than intention. It would require risk. Others move around you, chaperones in spirit, if not in form. Older women observe quietly, their experience lending them authority. Younger men mirror your restraint, each of you performing the same careful calculations. The room functions like a well-maintained mechanism, each part preventing the others from slipping. You notice how relationships form slowly here, if they form at all. Affection is postponed, deferred, filtered through family status, suitability. Love, when it occurs, arrives heavily supervised, shaped into something respectable before it is allowed to breathe. Desire must wait its turn, and often waits indefinitely. As the gathering continues, you maintain the same measured presence. You listen attentively. You respond politely. You never lean too far in any direction. The effort becomes second nature, though it never fully disappears. There is always the faint awareness of constraint, like a hand resting lightly but firmly on your shoulder. Eventually, the moment arrives to take your leave. Goodbyes are exchanged with warmth that stops just short of intimacy. Hands meet again briefly, eyes meet and part. Nothing unresolved is acknowledged, though much remains unspoken. As you step away, the air feels cooler, less perfumed. Your posture relaxes slightly, though not completely. The rules linger even when the room is left behind. You carry them with you, embedded now in thought and movement alike. What remains is a quiet understanding of how thoroughly manners have reshaped connection, how distance has been mistaken for dignity, how protection has become suppression, and how, beneath layers of courtesy and control, something human continues to exist, carefully contained, waiting for a space where it might speak without permission. The room empties gradually, not all at once, but in a sequence of polite withdrawals. Coats are collected, voices soften, and footsteps retreat into corridors where echoes are quickly absorbed. You remain composed throughout, though something tightens slightly beneath the calm exterior you present so easily now. Once you step away, once the exchange dissolves, the quiet that follows does not bring relief. It sharpens awareness. The feeling arrives without announcement, familiar and persistent. It settles just behind the ribs, light enough to ignore, heavy enough to guide every motion. It is not panic. Panic would be visible. This is subtler, more disciplined. It is the awareness that at any moment, without warning, something small could go wrong. You walk carefully, not because the floor is uneven, but because your body has learned caution. Each step carries an unspoken question. Is this pace correct? Is this posture appropriate? Are your hands positioned properly? The questions do not require answers. They exist to ensure vigilance. Even alone, the feeling remains. You pause briefly in a quieter corridor, where light fades slightly and the air cools. For a moment, no one is near. No voices, no movement. Yet you do not relax. Solitude does not remove the pressure. It magnifies it. Your shoulders remain aligned. Your expression remains neutral. You adjust your coat without needing to, smoothing fabric that has already settled. The gesture reassures you, though you are not certain why. Perhaps it confirms that nothing has slipped out of place. The fear is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with racing thoughts or sudden breathlessness. It is constant, low, efficient. It sharpens perception. You notice angles, distances, tones of voice. You register the placement of furniture, the openness of doors, the way light falls across surfaces. Everything feels potentially significant. You replay conversations without intending to. A sentence you offered earlier resurfaces. Was the phrasing precise enough? Did it lean too far toward honesty? Did it imply something unintended? You examine the memory carefully, then set it aside. No harm detected, for now. You understand that improperness is rarely obvious. It does not arrive fully formed. It emerges through accumulation. A word chosen poorly, a gesture held too long, a pause that invites interpretation. These things gather quietly until they suggest a pattern. Patterns draw attention. Attention is the danger. You have learned over time that correction rarely arrives directly. No one will tell you that you have misstepped. No one will explain which rule has been bent or broken. Instead, there will be a shift, a hesitation where there was ease, a silence where there was conversation, invitations that arrive later than expected or not at all. So you monitor yourself constantly, adjusting in small, nearly invisible ways. Your voice remains even. Your gaze does not linger. Your opinions soften before they reach the surface. This vigilance is exhausting, though it no longer feels like effort. It feels like maintenance. As you move through familiar spaces, you sense the house responding to you. Doors open smoothly, floors remain quiet beneath your feet. Nothing resists you. This too feels conditional. Order persists as long as you do. You think briefly of the moments when someone else failed. A man who spoke too passionately. Another who laughed too freely. Someone who revealed impatience or doubt. None of them disappeared. They simply became different, slightly misaligned, no longer entirely reliable. Your body has adapted to this constant assessment. Muscles hold tension without pain. Breath remains shallow but steady. The heart beats evenly, never racing, never fully at rest. You function within a narrow band of acceptable expression, and within that band you perform well. You become aware of how much of yourself remains unexpressed. Thoughts form and dissolve without ever reaching language. Feelings pass through you, unacknowledged, unnamed, because naming them would require deciding what to do with them. Action carries risk. Inaction is safer. The fear teaches you restraint, and restraint teaches you silence. You pass a mirror and catch your reflection unexpectedly. For a moment you look closely. The face appears composed, appropriate, familiar. The eyes reveal little. This, you know, is a success. Whatever exists behind that expression remains protected or imprisoned. The distinction has blurred over time. You straighten slightly, even though no one else is present. Old habits persist. The fear has outlived its original purpose. It no longer waits for others to observe. It observes on their behalf. There is a peculiar comfort in this vigilance. It gives structure to your thoughts. It offers certainty in a world where deviation carries consequences. As long as you remain attentive, as long as you continue to manage yourself, nothing catastrophic will occur. The system rewards consistency, and yet the cost is subtle but cumulative. You realize that you have not spoken freely in years, perhaps longer. Freedom, in this context, feels undefined, almost theoretical. You would not recognize it if it appeared. You pause again, standing near a window where the outside world appears softened by glass. People move below, their figures small and orderly. You watch them without emotion. Observation feels safer than participation. A sound behind you draws your attention. Footsteps approach, then pass. You nod automatically, receiving a nod in return. The exchange lasts less than a second, yet even here you monitor yourself. Was the nod too brief, too familiar, too distant? The moment dissolves before any conclusion can be reached. You continue on, aware that the fear has accompanied you all day and will continue to do so until sleep dulls its edge. Even then, it will not fully disappear. It will linger, shaping dreams, adjusting memory, ensuring that even rest remains disciplined. As evening approaches, the world grows quieter, but the vigilance does not fade. If anything, it sharpens. The day has provided countless opportunities for error, and though none appear to have occurred, certainty is never complete. There is always the possibility that something went unnoticed. This is the final refinement of properness, not obedience enforced by others, but self-regulation sustained by quiet anxiety. You do not need rules posted on walls or spoken aloud. You carry them within you, fully internalized, endlessly rehearsed. And so you move forward, composed and alert, the polished surface intact. Beneath it, the fear remains, not as a flaw, but as a feature. It keeps you contained. It keeps you acceptable. It keeps you safe. Or at least it convinces you that it does. The day eases into its softer hours without announcing the change. Light shifts first, thinning at the edges, losing the sharpness it carried earlier. The air grows more forgiving, as if granting permission for a different kind of attentiveness. You feel it immediately, not as freedom but as adjustment. The body loosens by a degree so small it is almost theoretical. This is the hour when effort is meant to look effortless. You find yourself holding a book, its cover unassuming, its contents respectable. Reading here is not escape, it is posture. You sit where light falls naturally over the page, chair angled just enough to suggest comfort without collapse. The book rests in your hands at a measured height. Too close would appear absorbed. Too far would look theatrical. You read steadily, turning pages at a pace that signals thoughtfulness rather than appetite. Words pass through you gently. You register themes, arguments, observations, but do not linger emotionally. The act is less about what is written and more about how you appear while reading it. A gentleman who reads demonstrates cultivation. A gentleman who reads too intently risks appearing solitary, even inward. So you maintain balance, allowing the book to occupy you without consuming you. Around you, others engage in similar pursuits. Newspapers unfold and refold. Journals are skimmed rather than studied. Pens are lifted occasionally to underline a sentence, then set aside. These gestures form a shared language, one that says, I am engaged but not obsessed, thoughtful but not troubled. When you rise from your chair, you do so without marking the moment. There is no need to announce completion. Leisure does not end, it transitions. You set the book down carefully, its place noted, its spine aligned. Disorder would suggest distraction. Even relaxation leaves traces that must be managed. Outside, the air invites movement. You walk not for destination, but for demonstration. The path is familiar, chosen for its visibility as much as its scenery. Trees line the way, trimmed and cooperative, their leaves moving just enough to suggest vitality without chaos. Gravel crunches softly beneath your steps, a sound that feels appropriate, controlled. Your pace adjusts instinctively. Walking too quickly would suggest impatience. Too slowly would hint at aimlessness. You find the middle ground, the pace that implies reflection without urgency. Hands rest loosely at your sides or clasped lightly behind your back. Either position feels correct, depending on the setting. You pass others doing the same. Nod exchanged, eye contact brief. No one interrupts. The walk is communal without being social, shared without being intimate. Each person occupies their own measured orbit, careful not to collide. Sport enters the afternoon gently, not as competition, but as ritual. Tennis, perhaps, or a round of golf. The specifics matter less than the manner. Equipment is handled respectfully. Movements are practiced, efficient. Even exertion is contained. Sweating too much would suggest effort. Straining would imply desire to win. You participate with quiet competence. You know the rules, not just of the game, but of the performance surrounding it. You congratulate without enthusiasm. You accept loss without visible disappointment. Success is acknowledged modestly, then released. The goal is not victory, but balance. Between moments of play, conversation resumes in softened tones. Remarks about form, about conditions, about the pleasantness of the afternoon. No one speaks of frustration or fatigue. Bodies may tire, but language does not reflect it. Discomfort is absorbed silently, transformed into endurance. There is a faint pleasure in this, you admit to yourself. The structure removes uncertainty. Leisure, when defined so precisely, becomes manageable. You know how to behave. You know what is expected. The afternoon unfolds without surprise, each activity reinforcing the sense that time is being used correctly. And yet beneath that comfort, something else stirs. A question without language. You feel it when you pause, when there is a moment between actions. Is this rest, or is it simply another obligation softened by sunlight? You dismiss the thought easily. Questioning leisure feels indulgent in itself. Later, you sit again, perhaps with tea this time. The cup warms your hands, its weight reassuring. Conversation drifts nearby, pleasant and inconsequential. You listen without joining immediately, allowing yourself the illusion of detachment. Even detachment, however, is measured. Too much would seem aloof. You contribute a comment when it feels appropriate, something observational, something light. It lands as intended, neither deep nor shallow. Heads nod. The exchange passes. You return to listening. The afternoon stretches comfortably, its length disguised by gentle activity. Time does not press, it glides. You notice how skillfully it has been shaped, how each element leads naturally to the next without requiring decision. Choice has been removed, and with it the possibility of misstep. This, you realise, is the genius of curated leisure. It appears optional while remaining compulsory. You could refuse in theory. In practice, refusal would require explanation. Participation is easier. Participation confirms belonging. As shadows lengthen, the body signals mild fatigue, the kind that feels earned and acceptable. You welcome it. It suggests productivity without labour, engagement without strain. The perfect exhaustion. You rise once more, stretching just enough to relieve stiffness, not enough to appear languid. The movement feels rehearsed, though you cannot remember learning it. Perhaps you did not. Perhaps it has always been there. The world begins to prepare for evening. Light dims, voices lower. Activities wind down without ending abruptly. You feel the transition before it occurs, the way you always do. Leisure recedes gently, making room for the next mode of being. As you move on, you carry with you the faint satisfaction of having rested correctly. The afternoon has passed without incident. Nothing excessive, nothing lacking. You have enjoyed yourself, within reason. And yet somewhere beneath the practiced ease, there remains the quiet awareness that even rest has been shaped, guided, and approved. That relaxation itself has become another role, performed with the same care as every other part of the day. You accept this without resistance. Acceptance, after all, is one of the most important performances of all. The light fades without urgency, thinning into amber, and then into something softer, more forgiving. Indoors, lamps are lit one by one, their glass chimneys glowing with a calm assurance that night has arrived exactly as expected. The house adjusts itself again, drawing curtains, closing out the last pale remnants of day. You feel the shift immediately. Evening asks for a different kind of vigilance. You enter the drawing room, as others do, not all at once, but gradually, filtering in until the space feels full without feeling crowded. Furniture has been arranged to encourage proximity without intimacy. Chairs face one another at thoughtful angles. Tables wait between them, bearing trays, glasses, small plates arranged with mathematical care. The air carries a blend of perfume, lamp oil, polished wood, and something sweet lingering from earlier indulgences. You take a place that feels correct, not chosen so much as discovered. Standing too long would suggest uncertainty. Sitting too quickly would imply eagerness. You settle into the moment with practiced ease, posture aligned, expression softened just enough to suggest openness without invitation. Smiles are exchanged immediately, appearing and disappearing with graceful efficiency. Each one communicates recognition, approval, neutrality, all at once. You return them instinctively. The muscles of your face know this work well. They lift and relax on command, conveying warmth without revealing depth. Conversation begins in fragments, gathering strength slowly. Voices remain low, rounded, carefully modulated. Nothing sharp enters the room. Topics circle gently, orbiting around shared experiences that require no explanation. Music discussed without emotion. Events recalled without consequence. Names mentioned without emphasis. Laughter appears occasionally, restrained and brief, like a signal rather than a response. When it happens, you allow yourself a small sound, enough to acknowledge the humour without surrendering to it. Excess would disrupt the balance. The room seems to breathe easier when laughter subsides quickly. You notice how movement is choreographed here. People lean in slightly, then retreat. Glasses are lifted, sipped, and set down in unison more often than coincidence would suggest. Hands gesture sparingly, tracing modest arcs in the air before returning to stillness. Every action feels rehearsed, though no one remembers rehearsing. A woman nearby speaks softly, her voice pleasant, carefully pitched. You listen attentively, nodding at intervals that suggest engagement. When you respond, your words are chosen for their neutrality, their ability to maintain rhythm rather than introduce variation. The exchange flows smoothly, neither of you stepping too close to anything that might feel real. Across the room, a group gathers around a piano. Someone plays lightly, fingers moving with skill but not flair. The music fills the space without dominating it, becoming another layer of atmosphere rather than an event. You listen without closing your eyes. Closing your eyes would appear indulgent. You become aware of how little silence exists here and how carefully it is managed. Pauses are filled quickly, not because anyone fears quiet, but because quiet might allow something unplanned to surface. The hum of conversation acts as a barrier, keeping thoughts from drifting too far inward. As the evening continues, the air grows warmer, denser. Lamps cast deeper shadows now, softening edges, making faces appear smoother, more agreeable. This light flatters everyone equally, disguising fatigue, concealing tension. You appreciate this, even as you recognize its purpose. A drink is offered. You accept, holding the glass lightly, aware of its temperature, its weight. You sip slowly, allowing the warmth to spread without haste. Alcohol here is not meant to intoxicate. It is meant to smooth transitions, to blur edges just enough to keep everything moving. You shift slightly in your chair, adjusting to the growing pressure of prolonged composure. The movement is minimal, carefully contained. No one notices, or perhaps everyone does, briefly, without registering it consciously. The conversation nearby drifts toward reminiscence. Stories are told of earlier times, framed fondly, though little detail is offered. Memory here is curated, edited for comfort. Difficulty is softened into anecdote. Loss becomes experience. You listen, contributing a brief comment that confirms understanding without inviting further exploration. You feel the weight of time passing, not measured by the clock, but by the accumulation of gestures, smiles, exchanges. Each one requires attention. Each one reinforces the pattern. The effort is subtle but persistent, like holding a pose longer than intended. At moments, the polite suffocation becomes almost tangible. The room is full, yet something essential feels absent. There is connection without closeness, warmth without heat. You sense it in yourself, a tightening beneath the ribs, a desire to exhale fully without knowing where such an exhale might be allowed. Someone suggests moving to another room. The shift occurs seamlessly. Chairs are vacated, glasses are set down. The group flows through doorways without congestion, each person adjusting pace instinctively to avoid collision. You follow, maintaining distance, aware of how bodies navigate space here without ever touching. In the new room, the pattern resumes immediately. Fresh arrangements, familiar rhythms. The continuity is impressive. Nothing breaks, nothing jars. The evening unfolds as it always does, reliable and contained. You catch yourself watching others more closely now. Faces lit by lamplight, expressions composed, eyes attentive but guarded. Everyone seems aware, on some level, of the same quiet constraint. Yet no one acknowledges it. Acknowledgement would disrupt the dance. The sensation grows slowly, not discomfort exactly, but compression. The sense that there is no space here to expand into. Every word, every movement, every thought must pass through layers of approval before it is allowed to exist. The effort is invisible, but it is there, shaping the room. You adjust again, subtly, reasserting control. This is not the moment to falter. You offer another smile, another comment, another polite laugh. Each one fits perfectly, maintaining the illusion of ease. As the evening deepens, fatigue settles in gently. Not the exhaustion of labour, but the weariness of sustained performance. You welcome it, because fatigue provides an excuse for restraint. It justifies silence. It allows you to withdraw slightly without explanation. Eventually, goodbyes begin to form, not abruptly, but as a gradual loosening. Voices soften further, gestures slow, coats are retrieved, hands are shaken lightly. Farewells are exchanged with warmth that remains carefully within bounds. When you step away at last, the air beyond the drawing room feels cooler, freer, though the habits remain. Your posture stays aligned, your expression remains composed. The performance does not end simply because the audience has dispersed. As you move on, the echo of voices fades, leaving behind the faint hum of the evening's restraint. The lamps will be dimmed, the rooms will empty, the furniture will return to stillness. What remains is the quiet understanding that this too has been done correctly. The dance has ended without misstep. The suffocation has been endured politely, and beneath it all, unspoken and unresolved, the desire for a moment out of rhythm lingers, waiting for a silence deep enough to hold it. Night settles more completely now, and with it comes a gentler pace. The rooms you pass through are quieter, their earlier warmth lingering like an afterimage. Lamps have been lowered, not extinguished, and their light no longer reaches as far as it once did. Shadows gather in corners where portraits hang, where heavy frames hold faces that have watched centuries unfold without moving. You slow as you walk, not from fatigue alone, but from a subtle pull you feel in these spaces. This part of the house does not rush anyone. It invites reflection simply by existing. The air feels older here, faintly scented with wax and dust, the accumulated residue of time rather than neglect. You stop before one of the portraits without intending to. The man in the frame stands upright, dressed in clothing once as precise and constraining as your own. His gaze is steady, impersonal, as if directed not at you, but through you. He carries your name, though the version of it he knew has softened slightly with the years. The resemblance is present, though not exact. It is enough to be unsettling. You have passed these portraits countless times, rarely pausing. Tonight they seem more insistent. Each face represents a life lived within a similar structure of expectation, each one shaped by rules that were never fully written down. Their expressions are composed, reserved, confident in the quiet way that suggests certainty without inquiry. You imagine their mornings, their careful dressing, their measured speech. The rituals would have differed in detail, but not in spirit. The same posture learned young, the same discipline reinforced daily, the same understanding that identity was something inherited before it was chosen. As you continue along the wall, names surface unbidden. Some are spoken often, others only on formal occasions. They appear engraved on silver, embroidered on linen, inscribed in books that sit unopened on shelves. You carry these names with you everywhere, though you rarely think of them as weight. Tonight, they feel heavier. The house itself is an inheritance, or at least the idea of it is. Even if ownership has shifted, even if walls have been renovated and rooms repurposed, the structure remains a vessel for memory. It teaches without speaking, it reminds without accusing. You live inside something that remembers more than you do. You move into a smaller room, one that is seldom used now. The furniture here feels older, less adjusted to modern comfort. Chairs sit upright, discouraging relaxation. A desk rests beneath a window that looks out onto darkness, reflecting only the room itself. On the walls, more portraits, smaller this time, their subjects younger, their eyes sharper. You sit carefully, aware of how the chair holds you. The silence deepens. In this quiet, the presence of the past becomes almost physical. It presses gently, insistently, reminding you that much of what you consider natural was decided long before you were born. You think of expectations passed down without ceremony. The assumption that you would behave in certain ways, value certain things, speak with particular restraint. No one sat you down to explain these rules. They were absorbed gradually, through observation and correction, through praise given quietly and disapproval conveyed without words. The past does not demand obedience directly. It shapes the environment so thoroughly that deviation feels unnatural. You realize that many of your choices were never truly choices at all. They were confirmations. You consider the idea of legacy, how often it is spoken of with pride. Legacy implies continuity, stability, honor. It suggests that something has endured, but endurance requires repetition. It requires that each generation reenacts the values of the last, whether or not they still fit. The portraits do not reveal doubt. Their faces are composed, their expressions settled. If they question the roles they inherited, those questions have not survived in oil and canvas. Only the outcome remains. Men who stood where you stand now, who learned to contain themselves, who carried the same quiet pressure forward. You feel it in your own body, the echo of their presence, in the way you hold yourself, in the way your voice finds its shape, in the way you pause before speaking, even when alone. These habits feel personal, yet they are shared across time. There is comfort in this, you admit, to belong to something larger than yourself, to move along a path already worn smooth. The past offers certainty, a script already tested. Following it requires less imagination, less risk. And yet that certainty carries its own burden. The space for difference narrows with each generation that chooses preservation over adaptation. The role becomes more defined, less flexible. The weight increases not because the expectations grow harsher, but because they grow heavier with repetition. You stand and move closer to one of the portraits, studying the details. The brushwork around the eyes suggests attentiveness, perhaps vigilance. The mouth is set firmly, lips pressed together in a way you recognize. You wonder what was left unsaid in this life, what desires were reshaped into duty, what thoughts were softened into acceptable opinions. There is no answer, of course. The past does not explain itself. It only persists. You step back, feeling the room close around you again. The house creaks faintly, settling as it always does at this hour. Somewhere, a clock marks the passage of time with restrained precision. The sound feels distant, almost ceremonial. You realize how much of your present has been arranged to honor what came before. Not out of reverence exactly, but out of habit. Tradition, after all, often survives because it becomes invisible. It feels like the natural order of things. As you leave the room, you carry this awareness with you. It does not provoke rebellion or regret. It simply exists, another layer added to the quiet understanding of who you are expected to be. The past walks beside you now, not as a ghost, but as a companion you have never known without. The corridors feel longer as you return, their familiarity tinged with something new. You pass beneath the portraits again, feeling their gaze without meeting it. They do not judge, they do not approve, they simply remain. By the time you reach the more familiar parts of the house, the weight has settled into something steadier. You know you will carry it forward, just as others did before you. Perhaps one day, someone will walk these same halls and feel the same quiet pressure, stopping briefly before your own likeness, wondering how much of themselves was inherited. For now, you continue on, composed and reflective, aware that the past has not faded into memory. It has folded itself neatly into the present, shaping each step you take, pressing gently, persistently, against everything you're allowed to become. The house settles gradually, like a long-held breath finally released, Doors close with care. Lamps are turned lower, their glow softening into something almost tender. Footsteps fade, until even their memory seems to dissolve into the walls. At last, the stillness feels complete. Not empty, but full in a way that allows no interruption. You move more slowly now. There is no audience left to impress, no room requiring vigilance, and yet your body does not immediately respond to the change. Posture remains upright, shoulders remain squared. The habits of the day linger, refusing to loosen all at once. Your bedroom receives you without ceremony. Curtains are drawn. The fire has been tended already, reduced to a steady warmth that neither flares nor fades. The air carries familiar scents. Clean linen, polished wood, the faint residue of soap. Everything waits exactly as it should, prepared in advance, anticipating your return. You remove your jacket carefully, folding it rather than dropping it, even though no one will see where it rests. Shoes are placed neatly side by side. Each action follows the same pattern it always has, unremarkable yet precise. Routine offers a strange comfort now. It gives your hands something to do while your thoughts drift. As layers of clothing are shed, you notice how light your body feels beneath them, and how unfamiliar that lightness is. Without the structure of fabric shaping you, guiding you, correcting you, there is a brief sensation of exposure. You pause, almost instinctively, as if expecting someone to observe the moment. No one does. The mirror catches your attention again, though you do not approach it immediately. When you finally do, the reflection appears subtly altered. The expression is softer now, less deliberate. Lines of fatigue trace themselves around the eyes, faint but undeniable. The face looks quieter, less guarded, though not entirely free. You wash, slowly this time, letting the water linger. It moves over skin that has spent the day, contained, disciplined, directed. The sensation feels grounding, almost intimate. You breathe more deeply without realizing it. The tension in your chest easing by degrees. Night clothes replace the day's armor, lighter fabric offering warmth without resistance. Even here, modesty is maintained. The garments are simple, functional, unadorned. Comfort exists, but only within accepted boundaries. There is no indulgence in softness, only relief. You sit at the edge of the bed for a moment, hands resting loosely, feeling the weight of the day settle into your muscles. It is not the exhaustion of physical labour. It is quieter than that, more pervasive, the fatigue of awareness, of restraint, of constant adjustment. Throughout the day, every gesture required consideration. Every word passed through filters. Every reaction was moderated, shaped, approved before it was allowed to exist. The effort was subtle, almost invisible, but relentless. Now that it is no longer required, the absence feels unfamiliar. You lie back slowly, arranging the covers with care. The mattress supports you firmly, not inviting collapse, but permitting rest. The ceiling above appears higher in the dim light, its details softened by shadow. You stare at it briefly, then let your eyes close. Thoughts arrive quietly. Moments from the day resurface, without order. A glance held too long, a sentence adjusted at the last instant, a smile offered automatically. None of these moments feel significant on their own, yet together they form the shape of the day you have lived. You wonder, not for the first time, which parts of you were allowed expression and which were not. The question is not urgent. It does not demand resolution. It simply exists, hovering gently at the edge of awareness. You think of impulses that never reached the surface, words that remained unspoken, reactions softened before they could form. Over time, these omissions have accumulated quietly, like dust in a corner no one checks. You are not certain what remains beneath them. The house creaks faintly as it settles further, wood responding to temperature, to age, to time itself. The sound feels companionable rather than intrusive. The house, like you, carries its history in these small noises, reminders that something endures beneath the surface. You shift slightly, adjusting the pillow, seeking a position that feels natural. The search itself feels strange. During the day, your body always knew where it belonged. Now, without instruction, it hesitates. Eventually, it finds stillness. Breathing deepens, muscles release their careful hold. The fear of improperness fades slightly here, dulled by darkness and privacy. Even so, it does not disappear entirely. It rests lightly, ready to return at the first hint of morning. In this quiet, you allow yourself a thought that would feel out of place in daylight. You consider the possibility that some version of yourself has never been seen, not by others, not even by you. A version that moves without calculation, speaks without adjustment, feels without translation. The idea is both intriguing and unsettling. You do not pursue it far. Such imagining lacks structure. It offers no guidance. Still it lingers, a faint outline against the dark. Sleep approaches slowly, respectfully, as if aware of the boundaries it must not cross too abruptly. You drift in and out of lightness, the edges of consciousness softening. The day loosens its grip, but not completely. Fragments remain, impressions rather than memories. As your thoughts blur, the effort of perfection recedes. The polished surface you have maintained all day grows less rigid, its edges smoothing. For a moment, there is no audience, no expectation, no role to perform. There is only rest. Yet even in this state, discipline remains. You do not sprawl. You do not abandon yourself entirely. Habit holds you gently, guiding even sleep into acceptable forms. Dreams, when they arrive, will likely follow familiar paths. Before slipping fully under, you sense the quiet irony of it all. A life constructed so carefully that even solitude feels supervised. A day spent maintaining order, concluding in a rest that still respects the same invisible rules. And yet within this exhaustion, there is something almost tender. The realization that you've endured another day without fracture. That the structure has held, that you too have held. Sleep claims you gradually, folding awareness inward. The house remains still. The world outside quiets. Morning will come, bringing with it the familiar rituals, the practiced composure, the steady return of expectation. For now, you rest in the narrow space permitted to you, suspended between who you are and who you are required to be, gathering strength to perform it all again when the light returns. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It approaches the way everything else in your life does, carefully, with restraint, as if mindful of rules it did not create, but fully understands. You lie still as darkness gathers weight around the room, the lamplight now only a memory reflected faintly in polished surfaces. The house has finished its settling. What remains is a deep, composed quiet. Your breathing slows, though you do not force it. Even rest has taught you patience. The sheets feel cool and clean against your skin, their smoothness reassuring in a way that has nothing to do with pleasure and everything to do with order. This is a familiar sensation, one you have known since childhood. Bed has always been a place, not just for sleep, but for containment. Outside, the world has softened. The city no longer asserts itself. No wheels pass, no voices rise. Somewhere far off, a clock marks the hour, its sound muted by distance and walls built thick enough to keep chaos out. Time continues, but it does so politely, without urgency. As your thoughts drift, the sharp edges of the day lose definition. Faces blur. Conversations dissolve into tone rather than meaning. Rooms flatten into impressions of warmth and shadow. What remains is not memory but atmosphere. The Edwardian world recedes gently, folding itself inward like a well-managed household, retiring for the night. You feel the comfort first. It settles into your limbs, heavy but not unpleasant. There is safety here. The empire you live beneath is vast, orderly, confident in its own permanence. It has provided structure, predictability, a sense that everything has its place. Even now, as you lie still, that structure holds you, keeping uncertainty at bay. Yet comfort has a texture, and this one is firm. You become aware, in the half-light of consciousness, of how much has been decided for you. Not recently, not explicitly, but long ago, in choices made by men whose portraits hang quietly in rooms you passed earlier. Their world still breathes through yours. Their values have settled into the walls, the routines, the language you use even in thought. The empire does not shout its presence. It whispers. It reassures you that everything is in order, that your life fits neatly into a larger design. It tells you that obedience is stability, that restraint is virtue, that silence can be strength. These messages arrive softly, so softly that they feel like your own conclusions. As sleep draws closer, you float briefly between awareness and surrender. In this narrow space, impressions overlap. You see lamplit rooms dissolving into shadow. You hear polite laughter fading into quiet. You feel the weight of tailored clothing remembered faintly, even as your body lies unburdened. There is relief in letting go of vigilance. Muscles release their final tension. The careful monitoring of expression, posture, tone finally loosens. No one is watching now, or perhaps they are, but the watching has become so internalized that it no longer requires an observer. A thought drifts through you, unshaped and gentle. You wonder what it would feel like to sleep without carrying the day's discipline into the night, to rest without maintaining composure. The idea does not trouble you. It feels distant, almost abstract, like imagining a climate you have never visited. The empire above you continues its quiet work, even now. Ships move. Offices prepare for morning. Institutions hold their shape through repetition and belief. You are a small part of this vast mechanism, resting beneath it, sustained by it, shaped by it. There is gratitude here, whether you acknowledge it or not. The order has given you a life free from sudden collapse. You do not fear hunger, you do not fear disorder. The boundaries that confine you also protect you. This trade has been accepted so long that it no longer feels like a trade at all. And yet, as consciousness fades further, another awareness lingers. A soft recognition of cost. You sense the outlines of things that never fully formed. Words you never learned to say. Feelings you learned to redirect before they could become demands. Curiosities that softened into interests, then faded entirely. These absences do not ache. They simply exist, like rooms in a house that remain locked, their contents unknown. Sleep thickens now, turning thoughts into fragments. The mind drifts through images without narrative, a staircase without end, a corridor lined with doors that never open, a voice speaking calmly, endlessly, without ever saying anything urgent. You do not resist this. Resistance would require effort, and effort has no place here. You allow yourself to be carried downward, deeper into the quiet. The empire fades into abstraction. No longer a structure of rules and expectations, but a sensation. Weighty, reassuring, inescapable. Your breathing evens out. The body accepts rest on the terms it has always known. Even dreams, if they come, will likely follow familiar patterns, shaped by the same restraint that governs waking life. There will be order even there. As you drift fully into sleep, you remain suspended between two truths. One is comfort, the undeniable ease of belonging to something stable, predictable, enduring. The other is confinement, the quiet narrowing that comes from living so carefully for so long that the edges of possibility soften and recede. Both truths coexist without conflict. You do not need to resolve them. Resolution would imply change, and change is not required here. The night holds you gently. The house remains still. The polite empire rests above you, vast and confident, certain of its own permanence. Beneath it you sleep, soothed by order, shaped by history, carrying the weight lightly now as dreams close around you and the world waits, composed and unchanged, for morning to return. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.